and welcome to Angels on Call. Let us discuss about peptic ulcer today. The questions related to this topic has been asked in various nursing examinations. So let us start with peptic ulcer. The contents for today's topic is definition, types of peptic ulcer, etiological factors, pathophysiology, clinical manifestation, diagnostic evaluation, complications, medical management, surgical management, and a nursing management and nursing diagnosis. So the definition of peptic ulcer is it is an hollowed out area. So a peptic ulcer is an excavation. It is a hollowed out area. So from this picture you can make out that this is the hollowed out area. So this hollowed out area can be in the stomach or in the duodenum, or it can be in your esophagus. So if it is in esophagus, we call them as esophageal ulcer. When it is in the stomach, we call it gastric ulcer, and in the duodenum it is duodenal ulcer. So based on the location, peptic ulcer is classified into gastric, duodenal and esophageal ulcer. So the definition, a peptic ulcer is an excavation or a hollowed out area that forms in the mucosal wall of the stomach in the pylorus. So what is a pylorus? It is the opening between stomach and duodenum. In the duodenum, that is the first part of small intestine, or in the esophagus. So a peptic ulcer is referred to as gastric, duodenal or esophageal ulcer depending on the location. So this ulcer, it can be gastric, it can be duodenal or esophageal, but not all three. It is very rare. Let us go to the types of peptic ulcer. The types are gastric ulcer, duodenal ulcer and esophageal ulcer. We will be discussing about gastric and duodenal ulcer in detail because esophageal ulcer, it doesn't happen. So gastric ulcer, as I said earlier, it happens in the pylorus. Pylorus is the opening between the stomach and duodenum. Then we have is the duodenal ulcer, that is ulcer in the duodenum, that is your first part of small intestine. Now we go to the etiological factors. From the image you can make out that old age people are at a higher risk of getting peptic ulcer. So I have classified the symptoms into gastric and duodenal ulcer. So first we will go into the gastric ulcer etiological factors. So first is age, that is old age, more than 70 years. Then Helicobacter pylori, alcohol, smoking, stress, NSAIDs and gastritis. So NSAIDs, what happen is they irritate the mucosal lining of the stomach. Hence normally every people say that we shouldn't take painkillers or any antipyretics every now and then whenever there is a slight headache or anything. This is because not only there are liver damages but also simple diseases like ulcers. So continuous taking intake of NSAIDs can also lead into ulcer. So the etiological factors for duodenal ulcer, it is the same as that of gastric ulcer, only because there are differences in 2 points, that is age, Helicobacter pylori, alcohol, smoking and stress is same for gastric and duodenal. The only point matters is cirrhosis and gastritis. So if you learn the etiological factor for a gastric ulcer, it is the same for that of duodenal ulcer, but only a point difference. Next is pathophysiology. Because of etiological factors, like if you are continuously smoking, if you are continuously taking a lot of NSAIDs, what happens is there is reduction of mucus secretion and there is decreased blood flow because of that. So because there is decreased blood flow, what happens is there is release of large quantities of pepsin. Pepsin is what? That is the acid. That is the stomach acid. So because of large quantity release of pepsin, there is increased concentration or there is increased activity of acid pepsin, which leads into ulceration. So the pathophysiology, I guess it is very simple. So because of etiological factors, because of increase intake of NSAIDs or because of recurrent gastritis, there is reduction of mucus secretion. Because there is reduction of mucus secretion, there is decreased blood flow. Because there is decrease in blood flow, there is increase in the quantity of pepsin and its activity, which leads into ulceration. Next, we go into the clinical manifestation. Since it is associated with your stomach, the first clinical manifestation is nothing but stomach pain. So I have classified the manifestations into gastric and duodenal. So first we go into gastric ulcer clinical manifestation. So the first clinical manifestation is dull and gnawing pain. So gnawing pain means whenever the person feels hungry, there is a type of pain in his stomach. It can be in the form of bloating, it can be in the form of burping, it can be in the form of burning sensation. So the first clinical manifestation for gastric ulcer is dull. The pain can be dull and it can be gnawing. The second clinical manifestation is abdominal discomfort. Yes, if there is pain, there is discomfort. There will be heartburn. There will be heartburn. As I said earlier, increased acidity can cause heartburn. Next is difficulty in breathing. Yes. Next is hematemesis. This is the extreme level of a symptom that you will observe in a gastric ulcer patient, that is hematemesis. Next is weight gain. Weight gain term is indigestion. The food will not at all get digested in your stomach. It will remain in your stomach, which will sometimes cause nausea as well as vomiting. And because of this, you can have loss of appetite. Yes, the previous food which you ate is not getting digested, and because of that, you're not feeling hungry. So you can relate all these clinical symptoms. So which will cause weight loss? You're not at all eating, so this will cause weight loss. Next is bloody stool. So it is an extreme level. Like I said in hematemesis, if the ulcer is not treated on time, there will be hemorrhage in that ulcerated site, which may cause hematemesis if it is a gastric ulcer, or bloody stools if it is in case of duodenal ulcer. So let's summarize the clinical manifestation of gastric ulcer. First is dull and gnawing pain. See, increases on an empty stomach. So next is abdominal discomfort. Because of pain, there is abdominal discomfort, and because of abdominal discomfort, there is heartburn. Because if there is continuous acidity, there is continuous burping, this will cause heartburn or pyrosis. Then because of heartburn, there can be difficulty in breathing and hematemesis, which is in extreme cases. And as I said, these people keep on eating to relieve pain, so this will cause weight gain. And duodenal ulcer, which is completely opposite to that of gastric ulcer. Because there is indigestion, they can be vomiting, which is very rare in ulcer patients. This may cause loss of appetite because the previously eaten food has not digested. Because of that, there will be loss of appetite and you are not eating, which will cause weight loss. And in extremely rare conditions, there will be bloody stools. Next, we go to the diagnostic evaluation. So the first diagnostic evaluation is nothing but physical assessment. Yes, pain. Through physical examination, pain can be revealed. Epigastric tenderness, abdominal distension, all these three are revealed through physical assessment. Next, we go to the barium study. So barium study is a type of X-ray wherein you are given some radioactive carbon. You are asked to swallow that, and then X-ray images are taken to confirm the diagnosis. Next is endoscopy. So endoscopy, we all know it is direct visualization of any injury or any disease or any invasion of infection. So in endoscopy, there is direct visualization of any inflammatory changes that are caused due to ulcers, or if there are ulcers, or if there are any other external lesions. So through endoscopy, there is a biopsy of gastric mucosa and any suspicious lesions. They obtain that and then they send this for the study. So endoscopy may reveal lesions that are not evident on X-ray studies because of the size or sometimes because of the location. Then there is stool test for occult blood, whether there is blood in stool. For that we have to check the stool. So next is breath test. So this test is done for detection of H. pylori. The patient is given to eat or drink something that is again radioactive carbon, and this H. pylori, what happens if it is there in your body, it breaks down this substance in your stomach, and then the patient is asked to blow into a bag which is then sealed. So if the patient is infected with H. pylori, the breath sample will contain radioactive carbon in the form of carbon dioxide. So when a patient is being posted for breath test, we take an history whether he has taken any antacid, because the antacids may cause negative results. As I said earlier, after endoscopy, the sample is being sent for biopsy and histology to check for any cell tumors or cancerous substances. Next, let us discuss on the complications of ulcer. If we go into the complications, if not taken seriously, the first major complication is hemorrhage. So as I said earlier, this is the extreme form of peptic ulcer, and it may cause hematemesis and melena, that is bloody stools. The color of the vomitus can be bright red or coffee brown color. Same in the case of stool, they can be bright red or coffee brown, because the hemoglobin has been digested and this causes coffee brown color. And we have to check whether the amount of blood in vomitus, or the patient is vomiting complete blood. So this observation has to be there to prevent any further hemorrhagic shock. Next is the medical management for peptic ulcer. So the pharmacological therapy, we go for antibiotics, because H. pylori is one of the causes of peptic ulcer. So antibiotics, we go for amoxicillin, clarithromycin, metronidazole, tinidazole, tetracycline and levofloxacin. And for proton pump inhibitors, we have, because there is large scale production of pepsin, so to prevent that, we have omeprazole, lansoprazole, rabeprazole, esomeprazole and pantoprazole. Then the second management is stress reduction and rest. As usual, many people say that ulcers, I have stomach ulcer because I take too much of tension or I am totally stressed. But what happens is that person actually he has ulcer, and this tension and stress is triggering that. I mean, it makes the symptoms more worse. So stress and tension, it doesn't cause ulcer. In short, it triggers the symptoms, or it worsens the symptoms. And the patient is encouraged to take lots and lots of rest. So currently the most commonly used therapy in the treatment of ulcers is the combination of these two, antibiotics and proton pump inhibitors. So what these proton pump inhibitors do is they reduce the acid by blocking the action of the cells that produce acid. We also use histamine 2, that is H2 receptors antagonist, and proton pump inhibitors as combination, and they are used to treat NSAIDs induced ulcers. Antacids reduce stomach acids, we all know that. So we have to advise to the patient to complete these medication regimen, because most patients, as I said earlier, they become asymptomatic within a few weeks, and it becomes our responsibility to stress this importance of following the prescribed regimen, so that the healing process can continue uninterrupted and the return of chronic ulcer symptoms can be prevented. So the maintenance dose of H2 receptor antagonists are usually recommended for 1 year. So next management should be stressed on smoking cessation. Yes, of course, because smoking, what happens is it decreases the secretion of bicarbonate from the pancreas and into the duodenum. So this results in increased acidity into the duodenum. So you smoke and you inhibit this ulcer repair. So smoking cessation should be the next management list. Next is dietary modifications. So the dietary modifications of peptic ulcer have been asked in few examinations, so I am stressing on this topic. It has been asked in one of the nursing examinations for 5 marks. So we have to explain to the patient about eating a balanced diet which should contain whole grains, fruits and vegetables. That is the most healthiest of all dietary fibers. Next is we have to consider use of multivitamins, because vitamin and mineral deficiency, what happens is it again worsens ulcer. So if the patient is not getting adequate vitamin or mineral in his food, it is advisable to take vitamin and mineral supplements. Limit alcohol, limit or avoid alcohol. Next is to avoid coffee or any caffeinated or decaffeinated beverages. Next is to avoid caffeine from other sources, like eating lots of chocolates, drinking lots of soda, Then avoiding spicy foods, acidic foods which causes stomach discomfort, which include like citrus foods, tomatoes, etc. Then avoid peppermint. It decreases the level of comfort, I mean it increases the level of discomfort. And avoiding very very large amounts of food, like even if eating decreases your pain, but that doesn't mean that you should eat a lot of them. We should avoid eating large meals, and we should not consume 3 to 4 hours, and not consuming anything 3 to 4 hours before bedtime. Next we go to the surgical management. This is the extreme, like if complications arrive, we go to the surgical management. First is vagotomy. This is a surgically removing a part or whole of the portion of vagus nerve. From the name itself, vagotomy, removal of vagus nerve. This can be done with or without pyloroplasty. What is pyloroplasty is? It is widening the opening in the lower part of stomach so that the stomach contents empty into the intestine. Like because of indigestion, a lot amount of food is there in the stomach. So pyloroplasty, what it does is, the surgeon opens the lower part of the pylorus and empties every content into the intestine. Next is gastrojejunostomy, that is creating a connection between the stomach and the intestine is gastrojejunostomy. Next is our management. The first management should be relieving pain. I mean, we have to give what the physician has prescribed, and the patient should avoid aspirin, foods and beverages, as I said earlier, that contains caffeine, and decaffeinated drinks and meals should be eaten at a regular period, and the patient has to be given a lot of rest. Next is, we should reduce anxiety. The next is reducing anxiety. Patients with peptic ulcer, they are actually anxious, but their anxiety is not always obvious. So we have to give them appropriate information about the medical regimens. Their questions should be answered, and the patient should be encouraged to express their fears, etc. So these are the ways to reduce anxiety. The next is, yes, we have to maintain their nutritional status. So we have to assess the patient for malnutrition and weight loss. And after recovery from acute phase of peptic ulcer, the patient should be advised what the importance of complying with the medication regimen and dietary restrictions. Last, we go to the nursing diagnosis. Yes, acute pain will be always on the top list, which can be related to erosion of stomach lining. So pathophysiology, in the previous topics also I have explained that what all events we are writing in pathophysiology. So based on that, you can frame your nursing diagnosis. So acute pain related to erosion of stomach lining, imbalanced nutrition, less than body requirement or more than body requirement, which can be related to decrease in intake or increase in intake. So in case of gastric ulcer, it can be imbalanced nutrition pattern, more than body requirement related to increase intake of food. In case of duodenal ulcer, it will be imbalanced nutrition pattern, less than body requirement related to decreased intake of food. Then it goes to fluid volume deficit if the patient has vomiting, or risk for fluid volume deficit related to nausea. Next is anxiety or fear related to prognosis of the disease, and then knowledge deficit related to medicine regime.